No matter what anybody says, it's all about power, and power is the ability to compel and use force. Psychopaths take advantage of other people. They use power. And so for someone who's truly psychopathic, you're nothing but a set of opportunities for short-term gain.
I tell people all the time that intent has a smell. There are terrible people out there. There are snakes that I will invest in you and invest in you and invest in you. And what you'll do at the end of that is you'll take it.
The safest place to store your wealth is... You can imagine the attractions of hedonism. And so everybody has their base desires, and I would say base for a variety of reasons. They're, lust, anger, those are good examples. They want what they want right bloody well now. And there's some gratification to be had in obtaining that. Now, the problem with right now is it's sort of to hell with other people and to hell with the future. And so maybe that's not an optimized path. This is why hedonism per se is a dysfunctional orientation. It reduces everything to the moment, and then it reduces everything to the whim inside the individual. So there's no future, there's no time, and there's no other people. Okay. Power, there's another example. It's like, well, I could go for power. I could compel and force other people to do what I want for my gratification, obviously, regardless of what they want. Why shouldn't I do that? If I could do it, and cultures like ancient Rome, cultures that are predicated on the notion that might makes right, they're predicated on the idea that, well, if you can do it, you should. And that the fact that you can and would makes you better, like by definition. If I can force someone to do what I want them to do and they can't resist, then why shouldn't I just be contemptuous of them? And I think the answer to that is, well, it backfires. It's like you can enforce your will on people for a while, but even among chimpanzees, the probability that the moment you turn your back or show any weakness that you're going to get torn into pieces is extremely high. So hedonism, power, those are sort of alternative motivational states. Well, this one, this pleasure in helping other people develop, I think, well, why shouldn't we think that that's just your cover story? And I think the reason for that is, well, here's one reason. Human beings are pair bonding creatures, and our children are dependent longer than the offspring of any organisms. So there's two pathways to reproduction. There's two patterns of natural world reproduction. There's the mosquito pathway. These have technical names. I can't remember. One is K. I can't remember the technical names. Mosquitoes on the one end, human beings on the other. So the mosquito strategy is 1 million offspring, and if 999,000 of them die, as long as one survives or two, you've done your job. No investment past sex, right? And there are human beings who have that strategy as well. No investment past sex, right? The alternative is immense investment, maybe multi-generational investment. That's parenting, grandparenting, great-grandparenting, maybe the establishment of a pattern that even works beyond that. Human beings have staked their existence on the high investment reproductive strategy. And so to the degree that we're biologically prepared to be fathers, there's an instinct for mentoring. And I think that what you're describing is the broader scale manifestation of exactly that. Now, you tied these things together. You said you discovered when you were young that helping other people develop was a great intrinsic pleasure. And you said maybe the most rewarding of the intrinsic pleasures. And I really do believe that's true. It's quite stunning to realize that. My graduate supervisor was a very great guy. He's still alive, Robert Peel. And Bob was a really good professor, and he got a lot of joy from lecturing. He was a really good researcher, a good administrator. Like, Bob had it all going. And still, the thing he felt that he took most pleasure in across the entire expanse of his career was helping his graduate students in particular develop their careers. He was very generous at that. And of course, it paid back to him immensely, because it turns out if you share ideas, you generate more ideas because the ideas get rewarded. And if you help other people develop their career, they tend to You know, it reflects very positively on you.
There's a saying in the SEAL teams: if you take care of your gear will take care of you. Meaning, if you take care of your parachute and you prepare it and you pack it correctly, when you pull your ripcord, it will open.
Yeah.
Or your dive gear, when you're underwater, if you prepared it and you've maintained it correctly, you can breathe underwater, which are really
and
good
you don't
things.
die.
And you don't die.
Yeah.
Well, the twist that I put on that was, if you take care of your people will take care of you.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely true, even in what you're just talking about with Bob.
Yeah.
Because Bob
it's an
invested
investment
in you.
strategy.
He took care of you.
Yeah.
And look, could we play the Jordan game on this thing, where maybe he was just doing that knowing that in the long run, you know, all those favors were going to come back and he was going to get taken care of. That'd be a really long-term strategy, and it'd be a kind of a gut check to put up with all these miserable graduate students this whole time, where you're just kind of putting chips on the table, hoping that these investments would pay off.
I also think, too, that at some point, you have to flip the definition. If your strategy is short-term gratification, that's one thing. But if your strategy is long-term mutual reinforcement and development, even if you can see that that's a benefit to you, if you're the sort of person that was only doing that because it was of benefit to you, you'd revert to the short term immediately.
Yep.
And so at some point you can't be, if it's a long enough term investment strategy, there's no being cynical about it anymore, because the details of the strategy obviate the necessity for the cynicism. So I've been writing about the Gospels, and there's Christ, one of Christ's, what would you say, commandments is to lay up treasures in heaven that do not rust, that moths cannot destroy, and robbers cannot steal, and rust cannot devour. Treasures in heaven. And so I've been trying to parse through exactly what that means. So it means to live in the light of eternity, first of all. So it means to view everything you do in the moment as extending, as if it extended infinitely throughout time. So Kant, the philosopher Kant, had this categorical imperative. You want to, don't do anything that you wouldn't want people to do if it was distributed widely. The biblical, especially in the Gospels, you see this, but it's more sophisticated. It's like everything you do should be the sort of thing that would work if everyone did it over the longest possible time with the most number of situations simultaneously addressed. So this notion of laying up treasure in heaven where it doesn't rust and where it can't be stolen, it really looks to me like it refers to something like reputation. Because you might say, well, where is the safest place to store your wealth? And the answer to that is, it's not in money, because money can inflate, for example, and it can be stolen. And there's all sorts of ways you can lose it. The safest place to store your wealth is in your reputation. And the most effective way of developing your reputation is to be of the most service you can possibly be to other people. You know, and so when we're on tour, with Tammy and I are on tour, we're thinking, well, this is a pretty good deal. You know, we put this effort into it, but it's returned thousands of fold, right? Because now you have people who are so happy with what you've done that they're thrilled to have you around. And so that's a pretty damn good deal. And so it's this perverse uniting of selflessness with, what would you say, with genuine reward.
Yeah, the luck that it just so happens that if you take care of other people and you sacrifice for them and you invest in them, it just so happens it'll come back to you.
Yeah, it just so happens that it is the best possible strategy that you could undertake. Yeah, and I think there's no doubt about that. And I also really wonder, you know, what the limit to that is, because it's obviously the case that, so here's another, you tell me what you think about this. Here's another form of fundamental reward. If you've gone out of your way for someone, let's say, so you made sacrifices for them, and then you see that that really helped them, and they let you know that that really helped them, that's a moving moment, you know, and I'm sure you've encountered that many times where people will come up to you, say, during the lectures or the tours, and they'll say, here's something you said because of something you learned, and here's how it helped me. And you think, like, that strikes a very deep chord. And that is one of the things that well, for us anyways, for Tammy and I, that's certainly one of the things that makes the tour worthwhile. But it does speak to that depth of motivation in mentorship. And this is a very effective, this is something very useful to know in the culture war that we're engaged in, because the accusation of the radical meta-Marxist types on the left is that there's no other motivation than power, right? No matter what anybody says, it's all about power, and power is the ability to compel and use force. But this strategy, this isn't a power strategy, right? This is a distribution of power strategy. It's like you're genuinely acting in the other person's best interest.
Yep.
And if that's also allied with an instinct that makes that deeply meaningful, and that's the instinct of fatherhood, as far as I'm concerned, it just makes a complete bloody mockery of the claim that the only fundamental human motivation is power.
Yep. And going back to a leadership perspective,
Yeah.
what I actually want as a leader is I don't have to do anything. Because you've stepped up and now you're running everything, and I can look up and out and move on.
Yeah.
That's number one. And number two, and I'd be interested in your opinion on this, I tell people all the time that intent has a smell. Intent has a smell. So if your intent is actually to take advantage of me and get things from me, and you're taking advantage of my mentorship, and you're eventually gonna, that intent will have a smell. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you meet someone and you go, man, that seems a little bit off.
Yeah.
This person seems a little bit off. I'm not really sure about this person.
Yeah.
And I think in my mind, that's their intent. It's seeping through. You can smell it. And if you got to watch out for that. And I always have to remind people that there are terrible people out there. There are snakes that I will invest in you and invest in you and invest in you. And what you'll do at the end of that is you'll take it and run away with it or turn it against me.
You bet.
And if I would say this, that is an absolute possibility. It can absolutely happen.
Yeah.
But if you invest in 10 people, 9 of them are going to give back to you and you'll be in a better place.
Yeah.
One person will try and run away, and they'll eventually, unfortunately for them, they'll dig themselves a hole that they can't get out.
Well, we also know that too. So psychopaths take advantage of other people. They use power. And so for someone who's truly psychopathic, you're nothing but a set of opportunities for short-term gain. But the problem with being a psychopath is that they have the same attitude towards themselves. So they'll sacrifice, relationships, obviously, which is the future to a large degree. They'll sacrifice their own future to take advantage in the moment. And the consequence of that is it's not a strategy designed for success. You hear all this, that there's all these psychopaths in positions of power and authority. It's like, most of the time, like the real hardcore psychopaths are very, very likely to end up in prison. But even the ones who fool some of the people some of the time, or even all of the people some of the time, the chickens come home to roost. It is not an effective strategy. And this has even been documented among chimpanzees. So now and then in chimpanzee troops, you get a leader, a dominant male, who's risen to the top because of force. Fundamentally. But those troops are not very functional, and his leadership is very unstable. And as I mentioned earlier, he's very likely to meet a dreadful end